And we're live. Hello, everyone, and welcome back to another episode of the Cover One Roundup here live every Monday night on the Cover One YouTube channel or subsequently wherever you listen to your podcasts. I am your host, Kyle Silagyi, joined this and every week by David Fox. And David, last week I said, well, before we got into like a 15-minute tangent about the plot of the movie Draft Day, I was like, we're going to next week probably do a live mock draft unless the Bills make a few, shocking signings. And oh boy, the Bills did make a few shocking signings. So
Brandon Bean, longtime listener and ally of the Cover One Roundup podcast, just doing us all the favors right now.
And we appreciate it because he gives us the content that we then critique him for sometimes. But today we're going to praise him. So we are going to talk about all the signings the Buffalo Bills have made thus far, maybe a few of the losses that they've suffered, but let's be honest, the gains or the losses pale in comparison. Whatever. The losses are not as bad when you compare them to the gains, I guess. Not EJ Gaines, though he might be back. Hot take. EJ Gaines will be a Buffalo Bill. Hot take. But no, we're not going to talk about that. Imagine first topic on the Von Miller signs with Bills show. We're talking about EJ Gaines. But no, we'll get into Von Miller in a couple of minutes. We'll also get into Jamison Crowder, who, if you're just tuning in, yes, the Bills did just sign Jamison Crowder to a one-year deal. They get their Cole Beasley replacement. We'll talk about him. We'll also talk about Jordan Phillips coming back, Shaq Lawson, all that stuff, and where we think the Bills should look as free agency. It's not coming to an end, obviously, but the bigger names are kind of joining teams, and the marquee guys are coming off the market. So we'll talk about what positions the Bills should address to close out this first section of free agency. Are we reading the same comment?
Is that directed at us?
What does that even mean?
I don't even know.
Oh, we are off to a great start.
Is this directed at us? Joseph
Tillman? Oh, that's incredible. That's a great comment. I don't even get it. Von Miller.
Wait. No. For those who may be listening later on the audio recording, we have one Joseph Tillman who just decided to comment, "Look at these two bread-only eating motherfuckers."
I did eat bread today. I had a Wegman sub. Had turkey on wheat. It was good.
I just had a stromboli. So does that count as bread? Is that bread?
No, I don't think I'd count that as bread. But I guess what else are you going to count it as? What else are you going to count it as? All right. So
anyway,
yeah, we have to start out with Von Miller. There's no other player we can start out with. But let's just preview Jamison Crowder here a bit. As we said, we'll get in after we talk about Von Miller because we have to start with Von Miller, right? I'm not going to bury the lead here, though that's exactly what I'm doing. After we talk about Von Miller, we're going to go through position by position and talk about the players added. And one of those, again, just signed is Jamison Crowder. So, David, before we get into Von Miller, because I'm sure that's what a lot of this show is going to be dedicated to, what are your just initial thoughts of Jamison Crowder?
He's a very good slot player. He was really productive with Washington when he was there. He's just very solid, and he came from that pretty loaded 2015 class, or at least like it kind of seemed loaded until a lot of them started playing, and then Kevin White just didn't turn into anything, and blah 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 blah. Jamison Crowder kind of is exactly who he was at Duke, which was just like a super steady, solid slot receiver. It's what got him paid by the Jets to come over there and sort of do what he did. He's been very productive. First year 600 something yards, second year 800, then 700, 300, and it looks like he missed some games in 2018 that year. Went to the Jets, 833 yards. 2020, 699 yards. Last year, 447 yards. He was kind of buried under some guys, and of course, a rookie quarterback, new system, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Deal's worth up to $4 million. Super cheap, cheaper than Cole Beasley would have cost. Probably not necessarily the same caliber of player as Cole Beasley in terms of like how he operates within an offense and where he's gonna be like aces on option routes all the time like Beasley is. But still, like a really good player. And for that type of money, that's easy. And underrated part, something that I'm sure might be of interest to certain people in certain places, has returned kicks and punts before. So,
ooh, is he coming for Isaiah McKenzie?
Well, they'll probably have him back there at least sometimes, but like I think they would rather have him back there if like McKenzie / Stevenson are messing up rather than having Micah Hyde be the sort of safety guy in those situations. So,
as we've talked about before, though, with the Bills and their kicker / punt, no, kick / punt return, not their kicker. Yes, the kicker does not have a role in the offense. He does, but not a big one. At least hopefully not. But no, with their kick / punt returner, they do not typically like to give that player a role in the offense. So if Crowder is returning kicks and punts, that means Isaiah McKenzie won the slot receiver competition, which I don't know. We'll see what happens. We'll talk more about Jamison Crowder here momentarily, but first let's not waste any more time here. Von Miller is a Buffalo Bill. Yes. I'll say it again for the people in the back. Von Miller is a Buffalo Bill, 6-year, $120 million deal. The people were going crazy on Twitter saying that's an overpay. Why would you give a 6-year deal to a 32-year-old? Well, they really didn't. It's more like a 3-year, $52.5 million deal. It happened, 5 days ago at this point, last Wednesday. I can't do quick maths. I'm not big Shaq, but so it's nearly a week old. The news is nearly a week old, but I still cannot wrap my head around it.
I'm the same way. Like I'm looking at over the cap right now, and they have the whole roster and like just slotted right between Micah Hyde and Matt Milano. It's Von Miller. Oh, right, Von Miller is on the Buffalo Bills, and
it doesn't make sense
for those of people who are not quite as addicted to things like the NFL draft as I am. Von Miller came out in the 2011 draft. The first 3 picks in that draft were Cam Newton, Von Miller, and Marcel Darius. All the lead up before that draft was the Panthers are going to take Cam Newton number 1 because they desperately need a quarterback. But the Bills and Chan Gailey love Cam Newton. Like that's still in my mind sometimes. And then all the mock drafts had Von Miller going number 3 to Buffalo because Marcel Darius was going to go number 2 to Denver. And then like the night before, it may have been Mayock who mocked Darius to Buffalo and then Von Miller to Denver. And so, a lot of us were thinking like, what's it going to be like when Von Miller's on the team? And then they drafted Marcel Darius. Well, now we know what it's like to have both.
Right.
And Cam Newton. And a better version of Cam Newton, for that matter, with Josh Allen.
That is true. Hopefully
high
having
school
Miller
me is freaking out right now.
Hopefully having Von Miller will be a bit more enjoyable than having Marcel Darius. So Marcel Darius was good there for a minute or two.
Darcel Marius.
Man. Yeah, I was gonna say a Stephen A. Smith would say Darcel Marius. But again, just as a lifelong resident of Buffalo, it doesn't make sense because things like this don't typically happen. David, I think you tweeted something after the Von Miller signing where it was just like Josh Allen is the best thing to ever happen to the city of Buffalo in general.
That is the tweet that's gotten the most engagement since I've ever been on Twitter. Just throwing that out there.
Well, it's not wrong. I don't want to say it's right, but it's certainly not wrong. But because that was obviously one of the reasons that was reported afterwards, or shortly after Von Miller agreed to terms with the Bills. And then he said as much in his introductory press conference that one of the major reasons why he wanted to sign here was because of Josh Allen. So again, I'm 24 years old. I'm not used to having a good quarterback. I'm not used to having a good Bills team. I'm not used to having players the caliber of Von Miller, right?
We're not used to nice things.
Right. I'm not used to thinking about a first ballot Hall of Famer. That's what he is. He's one of the greatest defensive players in the history of the NFL. And he just willingly committed the rest of his prime to the Buffalo Bills.
Yeah.
Like, it's just insane. Like, in a vacuum, right?
And leaving the Super
Leaving
Bowl
LA.
champion
In
Los
LA.
Angeles Rams to do it. Like, and he said that was very difficult for him because of, like, not even because, like, oh, LA's a great city or anything, but because, like, he really loved being in with the Rams and being around guys like Aaron Donald and Sean McVay and blah, 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 blah. So there's, like, clearly something that Brandon Beane and Sean McDermott have done here that's not just like, oh, we have a championship type roster. It's like there's several teams that have championship roster. He could have gone back to Denver and gone and played with Russell Wilson. He could have gone to the Bucks, for crying out loud. I mean, the Bucks probably wouldn't have figured out quite the cap space for that, but
I
but
still
still,
know the Bills figured it out.
Well, yeah, but still, there's like all these other teams that could have gone after him and sounded like they were in on him, and then suddenly the Bills come in and are like, oh yeah, here he is. He wants to come to Buffalo, and that's wild, especially considering the fact that Sean McDermott is just a terrible person and no one wants to play for him or like him.
Yeah, Ken Dorsey left and then he came back, according to some sources. But, like, it's just I cannot. It's hard to put into words because, like, again, in a vacuum, it makes sense, right? The Bills are a very good football team. As Von Miller said, the Bills were going to win a Super Bowl with or without him. So they're a good football team, borderline great football team. Maybe their biggest need was pass rusher, and they addressed that need with one of the best pass rushers in the NFL. Looking at it bare bones for what it is, and that alone, sure, makes perfect sense. But when you consider, again, Buffalo's typical place in the NFL pecking order, or you consider Buffalo's salary cap situation, it just doesn't. This came out of left field for everyone, especially for me. David, we've done podcasts. We've done numerous podcasts where we've talked about potential free agent targets. I think we just glossed over Von Miller one time, and we were just like, oh no, he's going to want
that was just like, that was never an option because we never thought, I mean, the market value was probably what he ended up getting, which was like 17 and a half. The value was probably close in that range. And so that just never seemed like an option. We were looking at like the high tier, like realistically, potentially was like Chandler Jones. He ended up getting 17 and a half as well, APY essentially. But that was just never a thought, coming into this. It was kind of just like, all right, if it seems like all these other guys that are going to be available are going to be way too expensive. So just be ready for when they bring back Jerry Hughes and maybe Shaq Lawson, and we'll get to Shaq Lawson later. But then like days go by, they still didn't bring back Jerry Hughes, so it sounded like they were trying to do something else and expected Jerry Hughes to still be available, and Jerry Hughes is still available. And then just that and earlier that day, of course, Chandler Jones signs his contract with the Raiders, and so it's like, missed out on him, all right, whatever. And then, of course, JD McKissic, and we'll get to him later, backs out on his deal, and so it's like, we had such a solid start, a couple of good signings, and now we're just kind of like, left a bad taste in the mouth. And then suddenly, boom, Von Miller.
Right, Von Miller. It's insane. Like, I saw like Bills Mafia or Bills Twitter after the Chandler Jones signing in Las Vegas. It was like, they weren't defeated necessarily, but it was like, okay, let's hope they trade for Danielle Hunter. Like, I guess
there was a lot of disappointment, because it's really sounded like Chandler Jones was like, interested, and it sounded like the Bills really were interested, and it was just like, it's not quite there. And then, of course, ends up going to the Raiders because they ended up paying him a bunch of money.
It's just, we'll get into what it means for the team, right? And him and Shaq Lawson, because we both know they bring equal skill sets to the team, but
equal value.
So we'll talk about that later. But just again to kick off here, I don't even think it's going to make sense when he's playing, like when he's on the field.
No, I mean it's crazy. I mean, it's going to be like, oh, okay, Von Miller is in fact on this field with Ed Oliver and Tim Settle / Jordan Phillips or whoever they want to throw out there, and Gregory Rousseau. Like, it's insane. It's absolutely insane Nothing about this makes any sense, and it's amazing.
After the Bills signed a 6-year deal or signed Von Miller to a 6-year deal, I was like, okay, so he has the 6-year deal because he has to be around at the end of it, so he can be around for the opening of the stadium that his signing was a distraction for, because it was rumored, right? That was the rumor that the Pagulas were pushing
Yep.
Brandon Beane to make a splash signing to distract from the fact that taxpayers are paying for $1 billion of the new stadium. Consider me distracted. I'm well distracted right now. You need $220 from me, Terry? I'll give 300. I'll do it right now, Terry. You just got Von Miller. They're gonna win a Super Bowl. I'm saying it right now. This is the hot take, right? Bills are gonna win the Super Bowl, but we'll get into that. I'm just overwhelmed. I'm still overwhelmed about the Bills signing Von Miller a week later.
And another thing from that 2011 draft cycle, the one thing that I remember a lot of draft experts and analysts saying about Von Miller was that they reminded him so much, or he reminded them so much of Cornelius Biscuit Bennett when he came out. And
he did
a lot of us, a lot of older Bills fans, not necessarily you or I, are more familiar with Cornelius Bennett and his time with the Buffalo Bills. So I'm pretty into that.
Oh, question here for Mark. Do you think a James Bradbury trade for pick 57? If the Bills, I don't know if Joe Shane does it. I don't know if they have the cap. I don't know if the Bills have the cap space to do it.
I was just about to look that up. James Bradbury currently has a cap number of $21 million. So that seems unlikely unless the Giants want to eat a bunch of dead cap, which they literally can't because they currently have less than $1 million in dead cap. So that doesn't seem like it's going to happen. It's a good thought. It's a good thought. I appreciate the thought.
If they swung it somehow, though, that would be you enter the draft. I mean, Brandon Beane has said before, like, oh, you don't want to enter the draft with any holes. You want to go in and be able to take best player available. Obviously, you want to do that, but you very rarely can do that. If the Bills were to somehow get James Bradbury, they go in the draft with no holes. Literally, whoever is there, whoever is the best player at 25, you take. Or that's where they pick, right? It's just okay. They haven't addressed corner. We'll get into that later into the cornerback situation. But before we do that, we have to start at the top, right? Start at quarterback. The Bills have made 2 signings at quarterback this offseason. Actually, 1 trade and 1 signing. Number 1, the first signing was Case Keenum. I wrote down here quarterback controversy. I don't know. People are talking. He is the Minneapolis Miracle conductor, right? He was the one who got the ball to current teammate Stephon Diggs, and the rest is history. So, maybe a quarterback controversy is brewing here in Buffalo. Again, the Bills trade a 7th-round pick to the Cleveland Browns for Case Keenum, who no controversy there in Cleveland. No controversy in their quarterback room whatsoever.
No issues, no controversies, no strange $250 million being thrown around to a potential sexual predator. Nothing like that. Nothing crazy like that.
So Case Keenum is a Buffalo Bill, 7th-round pick. Agreed to a restructured deal here in Buffalo. He'll make, I think, a $3.5 million cap hit, or he'll make $3.5 million. It's something like that. It's an affordable backup. It's an affordable deal for one of the more reputable, one of the more respected, I guess, backup quarterbacks in the NFL, and frankly, one of the better backup quarterbacks in the NFL. He can win you games. He's not Josh Allen, but no one's Josh Allen at this point. But he is a guy who I think, given the offense that the Bills are going to play, I think that he can come in, kind of keep things going for the most part, and win you a few games should something happen to Josh Allen. So, David, just what are your thoughts on Case Keenum here, if you have any earth-shattering thoughts?
Nothing earth-shattering. I mean, more or less what you said. He's also very experienced, and not just experienced, but experienced as a starter, right? Like he carried, or I wouldn't say necessarily carried. He was there on that Vikings team when they went to the NFC Championship and kept that offense stable. I mean, he got Adam Thielen and Stephon Diggs to 1,000 yards each. And I mean, there are so many worse backup quarterbacks in the NFL. And, God forbid, knock on all of the wood, if Josh Allen gets hurt and needs to miss a game or two, I would feel comfortable, not great, but comfortable that Case Keenum can like do what he needs to do to win a game. And that's all you can ask of a backup quarterback.
I agree, right? You they couldn't go into the season, right, with like a Matt Barkley type as their backup quarterback. That's not something you can't have a player like, I'm not saying specifically Matt Barkley, of course, but like a Matt Barkley tier of quarterback. You need something a little better. You need a tier above. If you are going to be a Super Bowl contending team, you need an insurance policy should something happen to your starter. Case Keenum is exactly that. Hopefully nothing happens to Josh Allen, but the Bills are still a good team with Case Keenum as their quarterback. They're still a wild card team probably with Case Keenum as their quarterback, but they're a Super Bowl contender with Josh Allen, obviously. Then the Bills signed Matt Barkley. Bitcoin Barkley is back, baby. Look, we know what Matt Barkley is. He's the 2013 QB1 or whatever, right? That was his draft year.
Oh my gosh.
That was a hell of a year.
Crazy year.
Imagine if you told a Bills fan on the night of the 2013 draft, hey, in 10 years, right, you will have a quarterback from the 2013 draft on your roster and a franchise quarterback. It'll be like, oh, we're going to get it right. We get it.
Oh, EJ Manuel actually worked out.
Sad. Matt Barkley, he's back again. Bitcoin Barkley, he's whatever. I like Matt Barkley as a person, right? I will always fondly remember the cryptocurrency talk aside, but but I will always fondly remember the 2018 game where they went into New York.
Yep.
Went into New Jersey. Went into MetLife Stadium with Matt Barkley. 5 days removed from signing a contract?
Yeah,
and they
pretty
just
much
lit them up.
Yeah.
Insane game. I think
put
Dale
up
Dawkins
40 points against the Jets for absolutely no reason at all, because that offense was awful that year, and he just came in with like zero practice time. I was like, all right, let's put up 200 something yards and do something with this.
I think that was Isaiah McKenzie's debut too. I think so, because again, this is just.
I know that was a Robert Foster game. I remember that being a big Robert Foster.
He like broke his thumb and then put his thumb back in. I don't know why I have such vivid memories of this this particular part of this very bad Bills season. But I think the Bills lost to the Bears with Nate Peterman at the helm.
Yes.
And then they signed Matt Barkley. They couldn't start Peterman again because he stunk. And then they start Barkley. They put 40, and they're like, okay, Matt Barkley is just better than Nate Peterman. So then they cut Nathan Peterman.
I feel like Derek Anderson was in between those two moves, though, right? Because then they had that Monday night game where Derek Anderson.
I feel like that was earlier, because I feel like they had Peterman. Peterman did something with the Texans. That's the game Allen got hurt. People are going to tune out, but Allen got hurt versus the Texans. Nate Peterman came in, threw an interception because that's what Nate Peterman does.
And then they interceptions in that game.
Then they went with Derek Anderson, who got killed against the Colts, and then the Patriots game happened. Derek Anderson got look at you. He got like a really bad concussion against the Patriots, and then Nate Peterman again, and then Matt Barkley, and now Josh Allen, and everything goes well. But yes, Matt Barkley's back again. I don't foresee him making the 53-man roster. I think this is just the Davis Webb of this year, because Davis Webb obviously is in New Jersey with the Giants. But I think that Matt Barkley probably is going to be on the practice squad next year, and just a guy who's going to be on the sideline with Josh Allen again, just that Davis Webb type role. I don't know if he has quite the relation. He has a good relationship with Josh Allen, but I don't know if it's like the coach relationship that Davis Webb had developed with Josh Allen there by the end. But maybe that's what the relationship develops into, because Matt Barkley certainly will not be on the field this year.
God willing.
Yeah. Do these signings though, or one trade, one signing, do these moves take the Bills, in your opinion, out of the running to draft a long-term developmental backup here in the draft coming up?
I think that, especially with this quarterback class being what it is, or rather what it isn't, I don't see a need or a point to really using one of your draft picks to draft a rookie quarterback that's just going to sit on the practice squad for this season. Just don't really see a point to that.
Douglas writes, drafting a quarterback is a wasted pick.
More or less.
Right.
Just, I don't necessarily see a big point in that.
Yeah, it really wouldn't make sense.
Yeah.
Maybe a UDFA, maybe someone to compete with Matt Barkley, but hey, whatever. It doesn't matter. We're not devoting any more time talking about the third string quarterback. All right, moving on to the running back position. Bills did make a signing here. J.D. McKissic, LOL. No, they did sign Duke Johnson. We'll talk about him momentarily, but first, I do want to talk about the J.D. McKissic situation. Because Brandon Beane is like very mad about this, like very animated and upset about it. And it's quite funny.
It was like, you could tell he was like white knuckling something underneath the desk. He was just like, I'm going to kill every single person in Washington. Like, he was so mad. And more than that, like, he basically said, like, he didn't really say it. He said, like, it's going to make doing business with them more difficult in the future, which is like the semi-polite way of saying, like, if you come knocking on our door, we are slamming it straight into your face, and you better move your fingers out of the door jam pretty quickly, or they're just gonna get smashed. Like, get out. Like, it was, I mean, the only person in the NFL that really says anything clearly and plainly are people like Mike Zimmer and Bruce Arians. But Brandon Beane was about as close to that level as Brandon Beane gets there. It was pretty intense.
Right. If you guys listening here, either live or on the replay, not the replay, what podcast, whatever. If you're not overly familiar with what's going on here, the Bills last week agreed to sign J.D. McKissic, Washington running back, to a 2-year, $7 million deal. The next day, it was reported that he broke that off and was instead going back to Washington on the same, or with the same contract. And Brandon Beane got very upset in his press conference a few days later. He was like, yeah, it's like an unwritten rule that once a player agrees to terms with his new team, the old team backs off. But this team did not do that. And then he went on Pat McAfee today and said essentially the same thing, where like or McAfee said, like, oh, you're going to remember that when you're doing business with the agent again. And Beane was like, oh, no, the agent was great. The agent did, the agent did what he was supposed to do. It was
he made a point of saying, like, the agent told Washington, like, it's over. Like, we're signing this contract. And then Washington just kept pushing and ultimately offered the same deal. And the same deal to just stay where you are is, if you're not interested in packing up and moving, and, then, yeah, that's fine. I mean, have fun playing with Carson Wentz instead of Josh Allen, but whatever. Like, and I don't necessarily like want to. I don't want to take a dump on J.D. McKissic. Like, if you want to make the same amount of money and stay where you are, like, that's fine, whatever. But like, it's such a weird situation. Like, there's really no reason for, especially since Washington didn't even offer the contract until after the Bills had agreed to that. I mean, at that point, it almost feels, in a way, they almost did like what you're supposed to do with restricted free agents, right? It's like,
right, like, oh yeah,
they can go out,
that's not how this works.
Yeah, right. It's like, but that's not what this is. That's not what this is, and that's really where I think a lot of the frustration comes from. It's like, this is not how this is done. Like, you can't, you shouldn't, like, you can obviously because they did, but like, you shouldn't just like come in and try and swoop in once we've already agreed to a deal.
It's I can see why Beane is as peeved as he is. And if I were Brandon Beane, which I do enough Beane impressions on this show that, I mean, you'd think I am sometimes, but if I were Beane, I wouldn't, cut off all communication with Washington, because they're still a football team. You still maybe need to negotiate some stuff from time to time. But every time they called regarding any of my players, I would just like, Chase Young. Like, hey, do you want to, we're looking to trade up, 3 spots in the draft. Can we make this happen? Yeah, throw in Chase Young. Like, that's Chase Young. Right, exactly.
Are you guys going to extend Terry McLaurin, or do you want us to do it? Do you want us to do that? We'll do that.
These egregious asks. That would be the. I hope reports come out that that's what Brandon Beane is doing to Washington because it would be hilarious. I
want Brandon Beane to hire someone specifically whose only purpose is to just like make crank calls to Washington's front office and like order pizzas and Uber Eats to their offices and be like, oh, who ordered this? He's like, and everybody's like, nobody ordered this. Stop bringing stuff to us. Just play all these like crazy psychological war games with Washington for absolutely no reason other than staking running back two from the Bills.
Right, because they slightly inconvenience them.
That's right.
Because this isn't how you do business.
Yeah, I mean, it just
we know that. Believe me, we know that. We know this isn't how you do business. But yeah, it stinks. But the Bills do sign Duke Johnson, who I think is going to play that McKissic role, going to fill in what they had carved out for J.D. McKissic. I don't know if he's going to be as good at it as J.D. McKissic figured to be. I thought J.D. McKissic was going to be real nice here in Buffalo. He and Josh Allen would have made for a nice pairing. Unfortunately, that is not going to happen. But again, Duke Johnson, he's a fine player. He'll probably make the roster. Again, pass catcher.
Yeah. I've always liked Duke Johnson. I remember him coming out of Miami. I thought he was a really like solid player. I've always been a little surprised that he never really stuck around with any team for a long time other than Cleveland, who ended up drafting him. I don't know exactly what he has left in him, but he could end up being more or less the exact same as J.D. McKissic, and honestly ended up being a lot cheaper, I think, as well. So there's that.
David writes, Duke is way better than JD.
Maybe. We'll see.
It doesn't like neither move really moved.
Neither one. Yeah, it's not a huge deal for either one. Like JD McKissic is younger and a little, more interesting, I guess, but he's the same age as McKissic. Is that true?
Yes, I think Greg wrote, or I read somewhere where McKissic is only like 2 years younger.
No, for mine. Like okay.
But all right. If I said 2 years, I meant 2 weeks. But it doesn't matter. Okay. McKissic is they're roughly the same age, but like again, neither move. They needed a pass catching back. Now they have a pass catching back. I think they're still going to draft a running back. If I'm being honest, I don't know when they're going to draft a running back, but I do think. They are going to draft a running back at some point.
But like this moves the need for running back from like maybe they take one day 2 to they probably take one on day 3 now. And maybe they will end up taking someone on day 2, just sort of depending on how the board falls to them and who they like. But ultimately, I mean, there doesn't seem to be the same need for it with somebody like Duke Johnson behind Devin Singletary. So I like that type of move. And again, that goes back to the philosophy that they like to have coming into free agency, which is we want to fill all the holes so that we get to the draft. We're just looking at our board and we're just taking the best player that we want, the players that we want, not the players that we need.
Chewy writes, I would love to get Breece Hall. So would I. I would love to. I said this last week. There is no excuse that I can think of to draft Breece Hall, but oh boy, would I love Breece Hall. I think Breece Hall is going to be a player in the NFL, not, a capital P player, like a real good player. But unfortunately, I just don't think he ends up with the Bills. I can't find a way to swing it. Then again, I couldn't find a way to swing, Von Miller. I still don't know how Von Miller's finances work. I still have no comprehension of how Von Miller is on the Buffalo Bills, but here Kyle, he is. So.
I would like you to crunch those numbers again.
Is that a
just crunch or something? Just crunch.
I'm not a number cruncher. I failed math. I take that back. But if I went back now, I would fail math. Absolutely.
Oh, me too. It's not my thing anymore. Once we got past like the mad minutes in 4th grade, I was just like, oh god, this is rough, isn't it?
For me, as soon as long division was introduced, I was like, I'm done. Long division, I'm out. Lattice multiplication, no shot. No shot. That's why I'm a writer. They'll sign OJ Howard as well, moving on to the tight end position. OJ Howard is it's hard to like be over the moon about it because again, it's a TE2, it's a second tight end. But I'm very excited about the signing of OJ Howard. This is something that in our comment section for the past couple of weeks, there's been a lot of OJ Howard fans. A lot of people have brought up potentially signing OJ Howard. I never saw it as really. I never really thought about it that much because I didn't think this would be the type of tight end too they'd go with. I thought they'd go with a more blocking centric tight end. And it's not like OJ Howard's a bad blocker, I guess, but he's just more known for his athletic ability, right? Kind of this great athlete coming out of Alabama a couple years ago, who just never really developed into what you would want a first round tight end to develop into. Granted, some of that, or maybe most of that, is because Tampa Bay just kind of refused to use him. They signed Rob Gronkowski. It was just like, I know why they signed Rob Gronkowski, but they had OJ Howard. But like, again, OJ Howard, through no fault of his own, I guess, or through not a lot of fault of his own, or through not entirely his fault, never develops into that elite tight end. Oh boy. As someone else said, now
someone had to say it. We now have OJ
and a Bronco. For those who are listening. But yeah, OJ Howard, I like this signing because, again, I liked him coming out of Alabama in 2017. I'm now at the age where I've been writing about football long enough that the people who I wrote about in the draft years ago are now free agents. It's kind of weird to, it comes full circle. Again, it's a sign of getting old. But yes, but now that OJ Howard, I wrote an article for Bills Wire years ago about OJ Howard and why I thought he would have been a fit in the offense then. Obviously, a very different offense now. But I do think him coming in, playing as that TE2 opposite Dawson Knox, when the Bills are using two tight end sets, which we figure them to use more of now that Ken Dorsey and Aaron Cromer are here. His name's Aaron Cromer, right? Did I mess that up?
Yeah, Aaron Cromer.
Got it. First try. Yeah, with the two tight end sets that we expect them to deploy more often than they have in the past, or that Brian Dable did. I do think that OJ Howard and Dawson Knox are going to form just this very unique athletic tight end duo. And I'm intrigued to see what OJ Howard can achieve with Josh Allen. And I don't know if you listened to his introductory press conference, but there was a weird moment where he was asked about playing with Tom Brady and then moving on to Josh Allen. And he was like, yeah, it's cool that when it's all said and done, I can look back and say that I played with both of them. And it's like, is Josh Allen already in that conversation?
Listen, I mean, NFL players seem to think so because he's the reason why they're coming to Buffalo. I mean, that it's weird, but like that's the truth. I mean, there's already people who are like, I mean, Josh Allen is probably already the best Bills quarterback in Bills history.
Oh yeah, for sure.
Because the only other competition is Jim Kelly, and Jim Kelly isn't doing what Josh Allen did.
Jim Kelly didn't hurdle dudes.
That's right. I mean, he's just on a whole other level, Josh Allen. Like, and the thing with OJ Howard that I actually thought was kind of interesting, and this is something that you hear a lot from other free agents that come into Buffalo, is OJ Howard said, I came from Alabama, so I'm used to seeing sports training facilities like the ones you guys have here.
Mm-hmm.
Not everyone in the NFL is used to seeing something like this. Which I thought is very telling about how not only how Alabama treats its players and what kind of resources they have at the good old Crimson Tide, but also how some NFL teams decide to treat and handle their players. And, not to bring up Washington again, but, we some of us remember how the Trent Williams saga played out and why that played out the way it did. So, that's been a pretty big talking point for a number of free agents coming into Buffalo the last couple of years, actually, ever since they really redid that whole training facility. It's like, this thing is legit.
Right. I remember Cole Beasley, who's sad. Is it sad though? But yeah, after Cole Beasley signed here, he got into a Twitter fight with someone from Dallas because Dallas, Dallas fans, but someone tweeted at him like, you're in Buffalo. You left Dallas for Buffalo, just that. Yeah. And Cole Beasley was like, actually, like for a football player, Buffalo has nicer facilities than Dallas. And Dallas fans were like, what do you mean? We are Dallas. That's That's my impression of Dallas fans. They just say we are Dallas. That's really the only argument they have.
I also remember Cole Beasley saying, to someone who's like, "Oh, you went to Buffalo, you're going to lose all these games," and he's like, "I was in Dallas for like 6 years and we didn't win shit." So
exactly, it's incredible. We have a Texans fan in here.
Wow.
Hello, Texans fan.
Hello, new owner of 3 first-round draft picks, Texans fan.
We talked about the non-controversial quarterback situation in Cleveland earlier. No controversy whatsoever.
Hey, you know what? L. Smith 11. That's no longer your problem. So good for you.
Can you imagine our red zone with Knox and Howard and Gabe Davis?
And Stephon Diggs and Josh Allen throwing to
and Josh Allen. Josh Allen's the biggest red zone threat out of them all. Dude, this is a good football team. I'm just now coming around. This is a real good football team. Now that I'm thinking about it, it is. And then Chewy also writes, "Hope OJ Howard can stay healthy." Yeah, he did have a torn Achilles in 2020. So it also it has to be stated, like, people might look at his stats from last year and be a bit underwhelmed. Because he played in 17 games, didn't start that many. But again, look at the rest of the tight ends Tampa Bay had. Look how many snaps he had, and also consider he was recovering from a torn Achilles, which that's not like you're back the next season and you're the same player type of injury.
Right.
So OJ Howard as tight end 2 in Buffalo next year could be super fun.
I am all about it, and I feel like if there ever is such a thing as a Rob Boris stan, Rob Boris, the tight ends coach for the Buffalo Bills, I am that person, because that man took as raw a prospect as there was in Dawson Knox and turned him into a legitimate tight end in the NFL. If there's something missing from OJ Howard's game in the NFL that is preventing him from being the best version of himself that there is, I honestly, I have confidence that Rob Boris is the type of person that can get that out of him, and I'm looking forward to seeing what that may or may not be.
My bold prediction is that OJ Howard plays so well that so it also is a commentary on the Pagulas. I think they're too cheap to hire someone to just take down OJ Simpson's name on the Wall of Fame. So I say this after they spent $120 million on Von Miller, but there's the big controversy, right? OJ Simpson's name is on the Wall of Fame in the Bills Stadium. So OJ Howard's going to play so well that they just replace Simpson with Howard. And there's your bold prediction. And then Jessica writes, "Don't forget touchdown Tom." How could I forget touchdown Tom?
How could we forget
Tommy Doyle? Moving on, I do believe, right? Are we good with OJ Howard?
We're good. I'm good.
There will be much OJ Howard talk next season, I am sure, because this is apparently a pro OJ Howard podcast now. But moving on here to the offensive line, we talked about Roger Saffold last week because he was one of a few signings that the Bills had made at that point. They had already signed him because he was a free agent. But I think our thoughts remain the same. Very good run blocker. Maybe a Band-Aid, but again, it's a situation for him to succeed, coming back with Cromer, the coach who he performed very well under in LA. So again, I'm cool with Roger Saffold.
Yeah, I think with Saffold, obviously he has familiarity with Cromer from their LA days. I think that even if you want to call him a Band-Aid, which I mean, essentially he is, it's better to pay a Band-Aid, 1 year, $8 million total than to, let's say, trade multiple picks for somebody mid-season because you realize, oh crap, we don't have anyone here at this position or whatever. So I think this is a very good, solid signing, and we already talked about this. So let's move on to the other offensive line signing that was made today.
I don't know how to pronounce this.
Neither do I.
Greg Mance?
We're going to go with Mance.
I'm assuming it's Mance. There's a C and a Z, which is
it's either Mance or Menches, and I think Menches
it's unnatural,
is
immoral. Greg Mance. He's a backup, right? If he makes the roster, he's just going to be that that Ryan Bates, right? Not in that he's going to be good when he's called upon, though he might be, but that guy who can do a little bit of everything, right? The backup with experience at all 3 positions and on the interior of the line. So, should something happen to Saffold, Morse, or Bates, or Ford, or whoever's playing, you have Greg Mance who can sit or get in there and hopefully be competent until you get short up there, get healthy. So yeah, just a nice depth piece, assuming he makes the roster.
Yeah, I mean he started over 30 games in the NFL. He can play multiple positions. As long as he doesn't just like completely fall flat on his butt every single play, I'm this is perfectly fine and reasonable. So, while we're on the topic of offensive linemen, and since you brought up Ryan Bates somewhat quickly, when was the last time a restricted free agent got this much like attention? Like Ryan Bates is going through like a tour of quite a few teams in the NFL right now. Like it was, I think Minnesota was looking at him initially, and then New England brought him in, and now Chicago's looking at him. I mean, somebody that I think a lot of teams, or at least a lot of us, thought like, throw a tender on him, it'll be fine. Apparently, NFL teams are like, we would sure like this dude, like, and this is the sort of other part of the fruits of your labor coming into the light. Ryan Bates was a developmental project for the Bills for the last couple of years, and he finally got into the starting lineup, played pretty well, and now everybody's like, oh, well, now that you've done all the hard part, why don't we just take him from you? Now, again, because he's a restricted free agent, no team can just like sign him off the street or whatever. He has to be made an offer, and then the Bills have an opportunity to match that offer. I have no idea who would actually pay Ryan Bates more than $3 or $4 million or whatever that tender actually is worth, but there might be someone. I mean, from what it sounds like, I mean, New England always likes their versatile offensive linemen. Ryan Bates is definitely that. Minnesota, I mean, they just need offensive linemen, period. And same thing with Chicago. And Chicago, I mean, this would be sort of one of those like really low key signings that most Chicago fans would be like, who cares? And then like a year or two later, they're like, oh my gosh, Ryan Poles is a genius because he brought this guy in for like $4 million and nobody knew about him and blah, blah, blah. And so I am interested to see how this all plays out. I am hoping, of course, that Ryan/Rick Bates ends up back in Buffalo. But
I think he will.
See.
I think he will, unless some team, tries to be an ass. Unless Washington,
wants to swoop in again,
right? And they like look at the Bills' cap space and they're like, okay, we're going to construct it in such a way that they cannot match it. Which,
right?
I mean, don't piss Brandon Bean off.
I don't think that's something you
necessarily want. Oh, absolutely, but I don't think. Best highlights. Thank you so much for the
thank you very much for the super chat.
Right. Do you think we could get OBJ still? This could transition into wide receivers here, so I'll take the transition. Would I like OBJ? Yes, absolutely. But I don't think this is going to sound stupid. This could be like an old takes exposed, like real quick. I think it's possible that OBJ doesn't sign anywhere this offseason. I think it's possible that OBJ just kind of spends the offseason recovering on his own, doing his own rehab, own recovery, and then like next year, like week 10, week 11, if he's ready to go, he looks at looks at which teams need a receiver, looks at which teams are competitive again, signs a 1-year deal, does essentially what he did with LA, but next year, see if he can kind of replicate that with another team, get another Super Bowl, and then cash in.
Yeah, I think that's possible. He could. I would be a little surprised if he goes unsigned throughout the entire offseason. I think someone is going to be willing to at least throw some money at him, especially in the middle of the season, right? Like if they feel like we could stash this dude for a couple weeks until we get into December and then into the playoffs in January, like I could see that happening. But I don't know if the Bills are necessarily interested. I don't know if there's been any reported interest between the two sides on that. So we will see, but I doubt that OBJ ends up as a Buffalo Bill. which is ironic because they were apparently quite interested in OBJ in that draft, but then they weren't.
They got the best receiver in the draft.
They weren't interested in him enough to pass up Sammy Watkins. So there you go.
We've had a lot of old draft talk on this podcast.
Kyle, let me tell you something. Sammy Watkins is from where I live in Fort Myers, Florida.
Oh,
I had tracked that man's career when he went to Clemson. He was a legit player at Clemson. When Buffalo traded up to get Sammy Watkins, I lost my mind. I couldn't believe that they took him. And his first 2 years in the NFL was like, oh my gosh, this is exactly what they needed. And then everything else happened. And
then the foot happened.
Yeah.
And then Sammy Watkins maybe joined a cult. I don't know.
Probably.
Right. Maybe. Who knows? All right. We have 10 minutes. Oh, no, wait.
No.
I think, yes.
Air raid hours. The air raid starts at 9.
Okay.
We're good.
I had a mini heart attack. Appreciate you, though. Appreciate you looking out. All right. Moving to, let's talk about Jamison Crowder. Have we talked about everything with Jamison Crowder? Essentially, people are going on. People are talking about it.
Kind of hit the bullet points. Good slot receiver, clearly here to replace Beasley. Has some return experience. Really good signing. Can make up to $4 million this year. So another good, solid bargain bin type of signing that Brandon Beaton is known for, and good on him for getting this done right before we went on air to help us out.
Very much appreciate that. I do want to talk about, again, just the receiver position in general, because look, this is a position that we've talked about numerous times on this podcast as potentially being a position that the Bills look at in round 1. It is a deep receiver class, so maybe more likely day 2 or day 3 with the receiver, but it's always a deep receiver class nowadays, just given how football is structured from youth up. Receivers are always coming out playing really well, but I do think maybe the Jamison Crowder signing doesn't necessarily take them out of a receiver or out of the running for a receiver in round 1, but like they don't need a slot guy anymore. They don't need a starting slot receiver. They have Jamison Crowder.
It's more or less what we talked about with Duke Johnson, where it's like they could still take this position early in the draft, but because they signed this guy, they don't have to. So again, this is like goes back to what Brandon Bean loves doing and what he spends his entire free agency period doing. We're here to fill holes, fill gaps in the roster, so that when we get to the draft, we get the guys that we want, not the guys that we feel like we have to get. We get the best player available. We're here to look at our board and just go, boom, this is our guy. This is our guy. And we like him enough. And knowing Brandon Bean, he might even try to trade up for that player. So that's where they always want to position themselves. And right now, with the signings of Duke Johnson and of course Jamison Crowder, that's where they're at with this, and I'm very very into that. So,
has the Arkansas Pro Day happened yet? Do we know?
Not that I'm aware of. I can have my producer look that up.
I just hope, obviously, I wouldn't wish any ill will upon any player. I obviously would not wish this, but I kind of maybe am holding out hope that like potentially Treylon Burks has like maybe a similar outing as he had at the Combine.
The Arkansas Pro Day happened on March 9th, 2022. Treylon Burks did not run his 40-yard dash at the Arkansas Pro Day, which is interesting because he did not have
underwhelming.
He was underwhelming is the right word, right? Like, because everybody expected him to be like this super athletic freak, like probably running in the 4.4s. People were saying like 4.3s, which was like, that was never going to happen.
Silly,
but like 4.4s was not unreasonable for him based on what I think people saw or were expecting or hearing from Treylon Burks in his camp. He ends up running like a 4.55, which was like, that's like appropriate given your size and height weight combination, but like, that's not what we were expecting. We were expecting 4.4, like legit speed type of numbers, not 4.5 type of numbers. So, and the thing with pro days is you kind of get like a bump at your pro day. You get a little bump, like especially if you're at Virginia Tech. Everybody runs a 4.3 at Virginia Tech. But like Traylon Burks, if you're choosing not to take that, generous little bump at the pro day, I don't want to say it's a red flag, but it's a little shady. It's a little iffy. I'm not quite as into the Traylon Burks idea as some other people are. But it's, he almost seems like fool's gold at this point. Just sort of like, this looks nice and shiny. Maybe just not worth the actual price that you need to pay for it.
I understood. We're not going to get too far into it, but we'll do this next week on the draft podcast. I'm sure we'll have plenty of Traylon Burks talk.
Yes.
Assuming he's there at 25 and I'm banging the table. I'm literally standing on the desk like, no, I'm not drafting any other player. Okay. But yes, there are people asking in the chat, is Crowder better than Cole Beasley? Is he an adequate replacement? I think like maybe on their best days, Beasley's a better receiver, a better slot receiver, a better slot weapon, slot option. But I like Jamison Crowder at $4 million more than I like Cole Beasley at $6 or $8 million or whatever he was at.
I agree with that. Jamison Crowder also just like generally more athletic than Cole Beasley is. Mm-hmm. Jamison Crowder ran like a 4.39 when he came out of college, which is like legit speed. And I think that Cole Beasley like is again one of those like quicker than fast type of dudes.
Yeah.
Cole Beasley is just like, he basically makes his money just operating from the slot and knowing like exactly where to target like the soft parts in the zone, how to read the leverage of the corner in the slot, and to breaking away from the man coverage based on like what kind of routes he knows he can run in that offense. Because it's all so many option routes. The option route is such a huge part of the Bills offense under Brian Daboll, and likely will be similar with Ken Dorsey. But I it's not that Jamison Crowder can't do that, but it's like, there's a difference between like, you are one of the best to do this, like Cole Beasley is, versus like, you're good at doing this, like Jamison Crowder, I think is. But Jamison Crowder does offer more athleticism, even in his somewhat older age. I mean, he's younger than Cole Beasley, I think, as well. So,
yep.
I think this is an adequate replacement. It's a little different. It's not a replication, but it's similar. And I think that's what they needed to do.
Where was this? There was someone who commented about Jamison Williams and asked if he slips to the late 30s, should the Bills trade up and get? Yes. Would Jamison Williams slide to the late 30s? We could trade back up and get him. If Jamison Williams is there at 25, you take him. I think you take him and don't think about it.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Moving on to the defensive side of the ball, the Bills retooled the defensive line, which is really an area that I think if there was one position or position group that needed an overhaul in the offseason, again, didn't necessarily need one, but if you were to ask me if they had to overhaul one, which group would you want it to be? I would have said the defensive line. And they largely do. They lose Harrison Phillips to Minnesota. He writes this heartfelt essay afterwards. Harrison Phillips, good guy, great bill. Yeah. Sad to see him go, but again, they replace him with the likes of Jordan Phillips, who was back like, I feel like he wasn't even like officially cut by Arizona, and he was already posting on Instagram like, I'm coming back, like Mafia, I'm coming home, which makes perfect sense for him if you just consider his career path, right? He was the odd man out in Miami. Just something didn't work in Miami, didn't click. I think he was getting into fights on the sideline or something like that. Like I remember in 2018, something happened in Miami. He got waived. The Bills pick him up. He comes in and he is impactful. There we go. The next year has that crazy year with the Bills. I think he had 8 or 9 sacks, took over as the starting 3-tech midway through the year. Jordan Phillips just had a great year, and Buffalo has really been the place for him when he needs to prove himself. He gets the most out of himself in Buffalo, which a lot of players do under Sean McDermott. But Jordan Phillips is one of those shining prime examples of a guy who is the best version of himself in Buffalo. And so you look at him, right? He goes to Arizona, gets paid, isn't necessarily bad, but he's hurt for a bit of the time, and they need the cap space, so they move on from him after 2 years. So where else would he go from Buffalo? than Buffalo. Obviously, if you were him, the only place that really makes sense is Buffalo, right? Let me go back there, prove myself yet again, and then I'll get paid, whether it's with Buffalo or whether it's with another team. So the Jordan Phillips signing, I'm happy with it. Ed Oliver is obviously the starter now. Ed Oliver is leaps and bounds ahead of Jordan Phillips, but it's going to be real nice to have Jordan Phillips as that rotational 3-tech. I think that's going to be real nice. And then Tim Settle, as we talked about last week, I think Bean said he's going to play 1-tech. So I don't know if he's going to be with Oliver or Phillips, but either or. Settle's nice. And then Daquan Jones, we didn't talk about him last week because it happened like 2 minutes after we went off air. So what are your thoughts on Daquan Jones?
This was someone that we talked about. I mean, like coming into free agency, we made our list of guys that we'd really like. You know, we mentioned guys. We really went into like who are the 1-tech nose tackle types that they can bring in. We talked about Austin Johnson being near the top of that list. We talked about Daquan Jones a little bit. So the fact they actually got one of these guys, I mean, he is a legit player, was a good player for Tennessee, played in Carolina the last couple of years for a very good defense, was very helpful there. He's a little older, but he is like really good technique wise. He brings that anchor that they so desperately need there. And I think that when you have him rotating with Tim Settle at that position, like Daquan Jones is more of that like big run stuffing type that they really want and really need, especially with how much nickel that they play. But Tim Settle is more of the like he's kind of weird in that he's a big 1-tech pass rusher. Which doesn't really exist and is kind of a weird thing to try and slot in, but he's just a big pass rusher from the interior. And so when it gets into 3rd and long, you have, Von Miller, of course, and you have Tim Settle probably, and you have Ed Oliver and Greg Rousseau. And that's legit. I mean, that's about as good as you're going to get in the NFL. And then on, 1st and 2nd down on normal rundowns, you've got guys like, again, Von Miller, now a Buffalo Bill. You have Greg Rousseau, who was like the number 1 graded edge defender for run defense per PFF for like the entire NFL, which is still insane to me. You have Ed Oliver, who is just super disruptive, and you have Daquan Jones, who's allowing all these guys to run free because he's taking up so much space and taking up all these blocks. It's great. This is exactly what we wanted the Bills to do. It's exactly what they needed to do. And this is something that I kind of wrote about a little bit, or at least mentioned in an article I wrote about Star Lotulelei. When Star Lotulelei was playing this year, early on he was playing super well. Then he got COVID and all that and blah, blah, blah. Now he's not on the team anymore. But I referenced a PFF article that came up during the 2021 offseason, which basically talked about like the more the NFL decides to play nickel, and they decide that that 3rd linebacker and the size that brings no longer is necessary, it means you need to replace that size somewhere else. So this nose tackle position that we've kind of like forced out of the NFL for a while is now going to come back because it's needed in order to allow this nickel defense to really work. You need to replace that size that you take away from the 2nd level and put it somewhere else. Now nose tackle is becoming a huge commodity again, where like you have guys like Sebastian Joseph Day getting paid by the Chargers because of the type of defense that they run and the way that they play their gap and a half defense. He is super critical in how they're going to run things. And they also got Austin Johnson, one of the targets that we were interested in. So those two are now there. Their run defense, which was atrocious last year, and part of that was just by design. Like they just did not care about who would run for 200 yards against them. They didn't care about that. But now they've got 2 guys who can anchor that middle. And you look at the last couple drafts, you have guys like Derek Brown, who went to the Panthers. He is like a true 1-tech. People were wondering, like, is this really somebody that you take in the top 10? And it turns out, yes, because he allows the rest of your defense to do exactly what they need to do. He allows guys like Brian Burns and Hassan Reddick do really, really, really good things. And Jeremy Chin, who is that nickel guy that can play up in the box and do things freely because he has guys like Derek Brown and, of course, Daquan Jones, who was there the last 2 years, to do those things for him. So people like that. And, of course, you look at this draft, Jordan Davis, same sort of thing. Everybody was talking about how much everybody, teams like the Chargers and the Bills, would love to have Jordan Davis on this team. And now both the Chargers and the Bills have said, hey, we brought in guys that can do this now. But that doesn't mean that of course doesn't mean Jordan Davis isn't valuable. It just means that they decide to address it in a different way. Jordan Davis can completely transform how a defense can play because he occupies space and blockers and allows you to run that nickel defense in a super important and critical way.
Well said.
Thank you for letting me rant.
That was good. That was informative.
And this is not this is not me coming up with this on my own. This is this is something that PFF has been on. This is something that guys that cover one like Eric and Kendall and Anthony have been on. Like, this is not new. This is just like how the NFL has to work. So kudos to the Bills for really addressing it. Like, Daquan Jones is going to be one of those guys that is not going to get a lot of the limelight, but he is going to be so critical for the way this defense operates moving forward.
Right, and we'll be here next year, maybe maybe a year from today, and people are going to be looking at his potential cap savings and being like, "Oh, I'd rather have that $6 or $7 million in cap space or whatever."
Right.
We're going to be like, "No, like you need him. You cannot not have him." But moving on here, but yeah, just it's a good overhaul of the defensive tackle room. Obviously Harrison gone, Star gone. One is more upsetting than the other, but to replace them with Jordan Phillips, Tim Settle, and Daquan Jones, that's a good haul. Moving on to defensive end, Von Miller.
Von Miller is a Buffalo Bill, Kyle. Did you know that?
It doesn't make sense. Von Miller is a Buffalo Bill. I guess, should we talk about what does he bring to the field? He's a closer. He's a finisher. That's what everyone's been saying. One of the greatest pass rushers in the history of the NFL.
Ever. The greatest pass rusher of this generation. And he was just on a team with the other greatest pass rusher of this generation in Aaron Donald. Like, Von Miller is absurd. And, like, we could talk about the fact that he's 33 years old and older. And, like, sure, he may have like lost a step, but for Von Miller, his lost a step is already is still like 3 steps ahead of other defensive ends in the NFL.
Mm-hmm.
If you watch just highlights of this dude when he played with the Rams, just with the Rams, in the half a season he played with the Rams, he is still incredible. He is absolutely incredible. And the weird thing with the Rams is they would drop him in coverage so often. It was the weird, like, I listened to the not to plug a non-cover one podcast, but if you want like other in-depth football talk that similar to what you get here at Cover One, you go listen to some of the previous podcasts of the Too High podcasts that PFF has sponsored. Seth Galina and Deontay Lee, especially leading up to the Super Bowl, they talk about Von Miller and that Rams defense. Like, they are like flabbergasted at the number of times that Von Miller gets dropped into coverage, because I think they dropped him into coverage with the Rams more often in that half a season and into the playoffs than he did in his entire time in Denver, which is crazy. It's crazy to even think about that, but it still ended up working, and he still ended up with like 9.5 sacks for the season. Like, it's insane what Von Miller is capable of. And with a full off season, not because he was also recovering from an injury coming into 2021, right? He had been injured in 2020. And I think just a full off season with this team, with one team, to me, this has to be like at least a 10 sack guy, like at least, and not in a, we need him to have 10 sacks. It's just like, I am just expecting 10 sacks because he is that type of player. Like, I can't imagine I suppose I could. I'd rather not, but I can't imagine a scenario where Von Miller is not just like a 10, 12 sack guy with this team right now. I'm so excited for Von Miller. And not only that, but the fact that guys like Wookie Basham and AJ Epinesa and
the rest of the guys
can just like always be around Von Miller at all times and just learn how to rush the passer from someone who is so technical in how he rushes the passer. Insane. The benefits that he brings this team are just insane.
Innumerable, one could say.
Innumerable. Good word, Kyle.
Is it a word? That could be a word.
It is a word.
Look at me.
Hey, that's sports journalism degree.
No, it has to do with math, kind of. It has to do with numbers. So again, not with it. But yeah, I think what else can be said about Von Miller besides it's wild that he chose Buffalo, I guess, is what it comes down to. If you've listened, I'm sure everyone here listening has listened to Von Miller's introductory press conference, but the Bills also put out a video today of his first 24 hours in Buffalo. And he said, like, numerous times, like, he thought he was going to be a Bill. Like, he prepared himself 10 years ago to be a Bill because he thought, as you were saying earlier, David, like, everyone thought, and even he thought he was going third overall. He was going to Buffalo. So he said that, like, he did research back then. He became kind of a fan of the franchise, became kind of a fan of the team, learned about the history of the city, the fan base. And now, I guess that being said, it makes sense that when he got a chance to choose where he wanted to play, comes to the team he thought he was going to be with initially. And now the team is much better than it was in 2011, thankfully, because if it wasn't, could you imagine? Oh boy. But yeah, I think that's really all that has to be said about Von Miller is it's going to be good. It's
pretty freaking cool.
It is wild.
It's cool.
And then the Bills, even further strengthen that defensive line with the signing of Shaq Lawson. He and Phillips. I don't think the numbers have been reported yet, but it's probably somewhere around the vet minimum. I can't imagine either of them having, for two guys who campaigned as hard as they did to get back to Buffalo, I really wouldn't be surprised if it's the vet minimum or not much more than that. But again, Shaq Lawson, ever since getting cut by the Jets at the end of last year, was kind of campaigning to get to Buffalo. Took him a couple months to get here, but here he is back in Buffalo. The thing about Shaq Lawson is I feel like around the league, people kind of are looking at him as like a bust because he got, he signed a contract 2 years ago and that contract was paid by 3 teams before the third team was just like, yeah, we're done with it. But yeah, I think the issue is, or what's unique about this is that Buffalo fans know what Shaq Lawson is, and Buffalo fans know what they're getting out of Shaq Lawson. They are getting a very good run defender who is at times a plus pass rusher. And when Shaq Lawson went and got his big contract, it was, of course, in his contract year, he was his best pass rusher, or he was the best pass rusher he's been. That's how it works. But he showed some pass rushing prowess in that contract year, and teams paid him like he was a good pass rusher, like he was going to continue to develop and become, a perennial, maybe 9-10 sack guy. That's not his game. That's not who Shaq Lawson is. That's never been who Shaq Lawson is. So now that he's coming back into Buffalo, and he's not going to be asked to be that premier pass rusher, not going to have to pretend that he's this premier pass rusher. He can just be a good run defender who can occasionally get a couple sacks. Yeah. Well, I think it's the perfect spot for him.
What's interesting with Shaq Lawson is like his production his final year was not like fake or anything. Like if you look at some of the advanced metrics, and of course, we've talked about those with Jerry Hughes to death. But it was not that dissimilar in terms of like the broad strokes of it, where like he was really good as a pressure player. He got plenty of pressure. He just wasn't like a big like sack numbers type of guy. But he also was a very like legitimately sound and good run defender. And like, so that you had like a base value for Shaq Lawson as a player who, brings in this other added element with pressure, largely because he's a pretty good athlete, all things considered. But as a rotational end where you have guys like Von Miller and Gregory Rousseau starting in front of you, I mean, heck yeah, I'm all in on that. Like, and what's interesting is like Jordan Phillips and Shaq Lawson were both free agents at the same time. Both of them got paid a pretty good contract when they left Buffalo. And I'm sure that there were some people who were like, they shouldn't have let him go. They shouldn't have let them walk. They should have done something to bring them back. But, the money that those two got paid, it made sense why the Bills didn't bring them back. And looking at it 2 years later, well, guess who was right? Like, they didn't work out for the teams that paid them. Like, and it's not because they are necessarily bad players, but like it's sort of an example of what doesn't get talked about enough is fit matters when you're in the NFL. Where you are really matters, and you can chase that money, and that's fine. No one's going to fault you for chasing the money because you get a limited amount of years in the NFL before you start falling off in a big way. Go get the money when you can get it. But I think that for guys like Shaq Lawson and Jordan Phillips, and I'll talk about Jordan Phillips and something he said in his press conference, but like they had their best times in Buffalo, and now they're back here. And Jordan Phillips talked about in his press conference his relationship with Leslie Frazier. He talked about after a game against Tennessee where he had a bunch of big plays. Mm-hmm. He had a bad practice the week after, and Leslie Frazier called him out on it. And Jordan Phillips just kind of took that like, crap, like here we are.
Here we go again.
I'm butting heads with the coaches and, blah, blah, blah. And Leslie Frazier like took the effort to bring him aside and basically just be like, listen, like what you did against Tennessee was really, really good. But if you practice like that, like we can't have you playing. Like you can't do that. And so it really meant a lot to Jordan Phillips that a coach like took him aside to really develop that relationship with him. And that's something that he's like carried with him apparently the last couple of years, because obviously I don't think he really had that in Arizona, or else he would still be there, I think. And the fact that like every NFL coach talks about culture, right? Every NFL coach likes talking about culture. There's only a few teams and a few coaches who actually care about culture and actually take the time to develop an actual culture. I think the Bills are absolutely one of those teams. And guys like Sean McDermott, like Leslie Frazier, and Brian Daboll when he was here are huge, huge culture guys. And they mean it, and they act on it, and they do things like taking guys like Jordan Phillips aside and saying, hey, you could be a really good player. We know you could be a really good player because you made all these plays in this previous game. But if you practice like ass, we're not going to play you. Like, we want you to be a good player. So go be a good player in all the phases that you're here, on the field, off the field, in practice. Like, you got to be that guy. So I think that that's a huge, huge thing. And it's a major reason why he came back here. And he even talked about, like, listen, even when I was in Arizona, I didn't miss a single Bills game. Mm-hmm. Like, you can ask me about any game. I could tell you, like, I've watched all of these games, which is just like, that's crazy to me. That's so crazy to me. And it's again, a huge testament to Sean McDermott and guys like Leslie Frazier, who just are so adamant about creating an actual culture that matters to their players. So kudos to the Bills for being that type of team and for allowing players to realize that a couple of years later.
Right. And speaking of that culture, it cannot be overstated how important Jordan Phillips and Shaq Lawson were to the locker room when they were here.
Those
like,
two
they were
dudes
beloved figures.
Energy. They every game you would always see Jordan Phillips just like getting everyone as hyped as possible. Like he just brings that amazing fun energy that you love seeing on the field. And Shaq Lawson is very similar in that way. And I think that in itself is actually kind of exciting on its own.
Oh, and Shaq Lawson was so loud in the locker room, but like in a good way. But like in a way where teammates just laughed at him. Like he was hilarious. Like he was a fun, good locker room presence. And like that's one of the, I would say even most of the reason why I was afraid of losing them after that 2019 season. Like I obviously, I realized the Bills probably weren't, they had the money, but they weren't in the business of giving those players that type of money.
Right.
But I was afraid of what losing both of them could have done to that locker room and to the defensive line. And obviously that didn't fall apart, right? The culture's still pretty strong. The locker room's still strong, but the defensive line hasn't been great. The defensive line hasn't been, wonderful since they left. But, it's good to have them back. There are people talking in here about whether or not Shaq Lawson is a roster lock.
Dan Van Cowenberg. Oh man, I'm sorry if I just butchered that name. Okay.
But, that is New England shit.
Yeah, they went and got paid and came back. That's wonderful. That's New England shit. I mean, that's true. That is true. That's exactly
New England shit.
Yeah. I mean, it's just like, hey, we'll let you go. You go get your money. Oh, great, I got my money. Oh crap. This is not the same as it was where I just was. Can I come back there in a little bit? And that's exactly what
what it is.
Yeah.
But what was I
By the way,
say?
New England still doesn't have an offensive play caller. Just wanted to throw that out there. Anyway,
Bill Belichick's gonna do it all, dude. No, people are talking about whether or not Shaq is a roster lock. I don't know if he's a roster lock, but I think he makes this 53.
So how many defensive linemen did the Bills carry last year? Was it 9 or 10?
I think it was 9
Generally.
because they traded Johnson. So they traded, my favorite player, Daryl Johnson. So I think it was 9.
That's true. So let's think about this. So you have Von Miller, for sure.
Right.
Greg Rousseau, for sure. Ed Oliver, for sure. Daquan Jones, I think, for sure. Tim Settle, for sure.
Yep. Jordan Phillips,
for sure. Boogie, for sure.
Epinesa,
for sure. Like, unless he has just like an awful off season, I would say he's as good a lock as you're gonna get. They don't like giving up on players when they're still on the rookie contract. So I would say for sure. And then you have Shaq Lawson. Am I missing
Shaq is
someone?
9. I think Shaq. I don't think so. Yeah, chat. Let us know if we miss one. But no, I think Shaq's 9 there.
And then you call up
Eli
Anko. Thank you, Kyle. You call up Eli Anko whenever you need a 10th guy in there. So I think I would say Shaq Lawson's probably a lock.
I think Lawson plays more defensive end than Boogie Basham does too. I think they're going to use Boogie Basham as a tweener. I think he's their number 9. I think he is their whatever.
For sure. And that's why they drafted Boogie Basham, to be that sort of inside out type of defensive lineman, which I'm kind of looking forward to see if they can really bring that into fruition in year 2 with him. So I'm all into it. Should we get to our
linebacker?
Yes, let's address this real quick though. Are Hughes and Addison for sure gone? Sure seems like it.
Yeah, I think so.
based on the 9 that we just had, I mean.
But yeah, I see no spot for them. So I would. Yeah. They almost have to be. And Justin Zimmer. He's gone too, right?
He's probably gone. He's coming off an injury.
Practice squad maybe.
Yeah, if he
or
wants to be on the practice squad.
IR him.
Yeah, whatever. But
and then the Bills signed Markel Lee. Which is maybe the biggest signing of the offseason.
I mean, clearly, somebody who has spent his time exclusively with the Bills and the Raiders, alternately, kind of flip-flopping between the two, weirdly.
Right, yeah.
Opposite ends of the country. But
was around the Bills last year, got cut during or after the preseason, I do believe. And then he went and was a special teamer for the Raiders. Now he's back. I don't necessarily expect him to make the roster, but good depth signing, good preseason body, I guess. Okay, so it is now time to look. We're already an hour and 20 deep, so we'll make this quick.
We're fine.
But looking at this roster, I think there's one position that we're both a little bit surprised the Bills haven't addressed thus far, or maybe we're not because they've never addressed this position really in any meaningful way, or they haven't since the 2017 draft. So we will talk about that position, but just for you, what positions do you think the Bills still have to address here in the rest of free agency?
I think cornerback is the most glaring one. Like you have Trey White, who's coming back from an ACL tear. There's no guarantee that he's going to be back and ready to go by August or September. And then you have Dane Jackson, who is the 7th round pick, who's played pretty well when he's been in there and played well when Trey White was out. Him and Levi Wallace played pretty well, but I mean, I don't want Dane Jackson being CB1 in week 1. Like that's not ideal in my mind. So I think that he's gotta they just gotta do something here. And there's been talk about Joe Hayden. He's 32 years old. He is what he is, and like we've talked about before, the Bills get their most out of defensive backs, but it's gonna be a little uninspiring if their whole offseason in free agency in terms of cornerback is just Joe Hayden. And I don't know who else would even be available. I'm not saying there is a better option available necessarily, especially given the cap space that they have. But yeah, it's kind of getting down to like you need to start doing something here. Just sort of looking at what's available based on over the cap. Trey Waynes is a what is an SFA? What is an SFA?
It sounds like a
what does that mean?
Boy band. I have no idea. What is it? I've never heard of an SFA.
I've heard of RFAs. I know UDFAs. I know ERFAs. I've never heard of an SFA.
Someone in the chat, Stephen F. Austin University. That's what it is.
Good Lord.
Are they in the NCAA tournament?
If someone in the chat knows what an SFA is or wants to throw up the bat signal to Greg,
right?
Like, good Lord.
Yeah, right. I like I said last week.
What does an SFA mean?
Where is Greg? Why is Greg just not in the waiting room of every Cover One podcast? Sexy free agent.
Isaac Yadam is sexy free agent. God.
Trey Waynes might be a good-looking guy. I don't know. I don't. Let me look up Trey Waynes. I'll tell you if Trey Waynes is an SFA.
Free agency. I'm looking this up. You can vamp if you want to, but like I'm looking this up right now.
He's a good-looking guy. Yeah, for sure. Signed free agent. Could that be it? Could be signed free agent?
Hold on. I got it. Street or other free agents. SFAs are players who had contracts that extended into at least this season with an NFL team, but were released from the contract. Players who were released or not on an active roster prior to the playoffs were free to sign future contracts for the league year in January. Now that the Super Bowl is complete, teams can begin to release players under contract. Unlike restricted free agents, unlike unrestricted free agents who are not allowed to sign until March 9th, these players are free to sign with any NFL team in the NFL once released from their contracts. So this is like a Roger Saffold type, I guess, where like they were released before their contract was up and the league year had started. So they were just free to sign anybody or free to sign with anybody, I guess.
Okay, yeah, but now that the league year's here, it doesn't matter.
I guess
he's a free agent regardless.
Well, here's where I think it might matter right now. Is just that I'm guessing that a street free agent probably does not count towards the compensatory pick calculator. So there's that. Trey Waynes, not really that good, but there you go. I don't want Trey Waynes.
All that talk for
probably not. Stephon Gilmore, everyone's favorite former
people
Bill.
Are going crazy about Stephon Gilmore.
It is amazing how the opinion of Stephon Gilmore has changed among Bills fans over the years.
Has it? I'm still anti Stephon Gilmore.
I've always loved Stephon Gilmore. He was way overhated when he was here in Buffalo. He goes to New England and has a great career there. And now everybody's like, oh, bring back Stephon Gilmore, bring him home. It's like, none of you guys liked him.
Not Kyle. Kyle's I didn't even hate Stephon Gilmore when he was here. I just don't necessarily want him. I can't I don't know. I don't know if you can do better than Stephon Gilmore given the current status of this team or given the salary cap and the available players. But
here's someone that is interesting that is available. Kyle Fuller from the Broncos. Spent a long time with the Bears. Was not really great in his first few years. Came on later and then signed with the Broncos when Vic Fangio was there later. He's an unrestricted free agent. No one signed him. I haven't heard anything impending about him. Maybe the Broncos are just like in a holding pattern with him, just hoping that like, hey, he'll just sort of come back here for a cheaper deal, et cetera, et cetera. I would be into Kyle Fuller.
I'd be down with Kyle Fuller.
I'd like that way better than Joe Hayden, who kind of almost seems inevitable at this point.
I'm telling you, EJ Gaines.
What is he? I thought he retired. Is he actually retired?
No shot, EJ. EJ Gaines will never retire. He is inevitable. He is immortal. EJ Gaines is inevitable. He will be a Buffalo Bill again. And the world is a better place when EJ Gaines is a Buffalo Bill. I'm telling you. EJ Gaines has been a Buffalo Bill like 4 times. And look at the corresponding world events. I want to do a mathematics study as to when did COVID start? When did all of these things? When did Russia invade Ukraine? All of this, and was EJ Gaines on the Bills roster? There is a direct correlation. I'm telling you, the Bills need to sign EJ Gaines.
We're not saying it. People are saying it.
People are
wondering.
There is, a correlation does not always equal causation, but in this particular instance, it does.
Outside of that, there's
Kevin Johnson. Oh, Kevin Johnson!
Oh, dude! Listen, I loved Kevin Johnson.
So did I.
I loved Kevin Johnson, like when he came out of that draft out of Wake Forest. I loved that dude. He had that like nasty attitude of just like, yeah, I'm better than you. And he was pretty good. He was the only guy that is like legitimately challenged Levi Wallace, where they actually like split reps between him and Levi Wallace. So
I think he retired though. I think he's done.
Did he retire? That's a shame.
I do think, because I think I was bored a couple of weeks ago and looked up what Kevin Johnson was.
Fair enough.
But or maybe that was EJ Gaines. I don't remember.
Who knows?
But no, I do think that's the level of signing they make. I don't know if they necessarily go after a Fuller or a Gilmore. I think they go after a guy in the EJ Gaines tier where just like, I guess he can spot start if you need him to. And then
Jason Verrett is out there. Kevin King is out there. Tavon Young, who really wasn't good for the Ravens, is out there. AJ Boye, Chavarius Ward. There's some guys in that kind of lower tier bucket that I guess would be fine. But I would rather avoid someone like Joe Hayden, if at all possible, just because I think he's over the hump. He's over the hill. And I think that give me love.
This is my guy. Douglas Masters is
Douglas Masters playing straight into Kyle's.
Give me Lafayette Pitts. I agree. Give me Lafayette Pitts. Oh boy. Again, I will. When the Bills signed Lafayette Pitts to the practice squad in 2020, I made a tribute video to "I'm Coming Home" by whoever. I forget who sings that song, but I made a 90-second tribute video, and it was incredible. Pat Pete. Isn't he kind of toast nowadays?
He wasn't good with Minnesota last year, and I'm out on that one as well. Yeah, kind of similar to Joe Hayden, which is a sad thing to say, but that's just sort of the truth.
Right. It'll be a whatever signing, and then they almost have to draft a guy high this year.
I mean, it almost feels like inevitable that this will be their first pick, whether that's in the first round or maybe they trade back and try to get like 2 second-round corners or something like that. I don't know. But I would imagine draft is their main solution here, but they'll likely bring in a veteran for a low cost, whoever that may end up being.
Interior offensive line, are you anticipating any moves here?
Probably not in free agency, other than whatever happens with Ryan Bates. Again, that seems like another draft thing, and probably not something where they necessarily need to go super high on, because when you have someone like Aaron Cromer, you just sort of ask him like, hey, who do you like? Who do you think you can develop? And I think that they could go, starting in like round 4 and just be like, all right, let's bring this dude. Let's get this dude. It would not surprise me if there are like multiple day 3 interior offensive line picks for this team. I could totally see that happening. I'd be very, very satisfied with that as well. So that's sort of where I would imagine they end up going. I don't if right now their big interior offensive line signing is Greg Mance, then I would imagine they're just kind of looking at the draft and saying, this is where we're going to replenish this particular position. So,
and I had written down wide receiver as a position to talk about, but
why'd you want to talk about that?
Well,
Kyle, why'd you want to talk about that?
There's this player. He's not necessarily a free agent, but he is available according to some reports. His name's Laviska Shenault. He plays for the Jacksonville Jaguars. I don't know if you read that report out of the Athletic today.
As soon as I got the notification, I opened that up and I was like, "Oh yes, yes,
it's like the
me
meme.
Everything."
It's like the meme where it's like sicko, and then looking in the window, and it's like, ha ha ha, yes. All the Urban Meyer content.
Very quickly on that particular article, DJ Chark went on the record in that article, which never happens. Like, players do not go on the record for this sort of stuff, and he was just like, "Yeah, this was awful." Like,
incredible.
That's the level of awfulness that Urban Meyer brought to the NFL.
Incompetence. I can't even say that word.
Imagine, if you will, Kyle, just for a second. Who was the Falcons coach that left in the middle of the season?
I don't remember.
And needed his way to Arkansas.
I don't remember. I
don't remember his name either, but awful person, terrible person. Had his first Arkansas press conference in a neck brace because he got into a motorcycle accident. Bobby Petrino, that's who it was.
That is who it was.
He left in the middle of the season. His whole team was a freaking disaster. And that was probably the worst coaching hire of all time until the Jaguars beat it with Urban freaking Meyer. I mean, that's just, it takes a lot to beat Bobby Petrino, the worst head coaching hire in the NFL, but they managed to do it. So good on Shad Khan and the Jags for doing that. Shout out for that.
It's just incredible. What was the quote? Like, who's this 99 guy with the Rams? Like,
oh my gosh,
who is this 99 guy? And then he tells Trevor Lawrence that people from the South are stupid, wherein Trevor Lawrence is from Georgia.
Trevor Lawrence is from Georgia.
What do you think Trevor Lawrence did in that situation? Do you think he just did like a Jim stare into the camera where he's just
here's what I'm wondering. Urban Meyer was head coaching Ohio State when Trevor Lawrence was a recruit.
You'd think he would have heard about this quarterback messiah down in Georgia.
What did he think that comment was doing? Like, what? God.
In Urban Meyer's defense.
And by the way, he was talking about former Buffalo Bill John Smokey Brown when he made that comment. So screw you, Urban Meyer, for all that. Ridiculous. Boy. Jackass.
In Urban Meyer's defense, Trevor Lawrence does kind of look like a surfer bro, right? Like, if you were to show me Trevor Lawrence...
He looks like Sunshine from Remember the Titans.
I've never seen the film.
How dare you?
But I've seen Draft Day a couple times.
All right, so... Cover One Roundup in the off season. We're just going to
watch football movies.
You're gonna watch Remember the Titans. I'm gonna watch Draft Day. It's gonna be 2 hours just reviewing those two movies with each other.
We just play the audio over each other.
Peak off season content for this.
That's incredible. Anyway, so about this, Laviska Shenault is apparently not a free agent. He's on the market because. Yeah. The Jags spent a bunch of money on a bunch of mid receivers. Yes. I mean, Christian Kirk's more than a mid receiver, but is he $18 million a year good? No. Zay Jones got a lot of money. Yeah, they've built an interesting offense down there in Jacksonville. Right. I wouldn't say good, but it's an interesting offense, and it looks like Laviska Shenault might be the odd man out. I don't care. I don't care what you have to trade. It's not going to be much. Just bring Laviska Shenault.
Laviska Shenault, no matter what.
Laviska Shenault, no matter what. Look, it's not. I don't want to pretend like he's this diamond in the rough. Well, he is a diamond in the rough, but look, he hasn't been great his first 2 years. Some of it's the offense, some of it's the incompetence of the Jacksonville Jaguars and the coaching staffs and the offensive systems and things like that. But also Laviska Shenault's been underwhelming, right? Yeah. Just a lot of weird stuff, like running the wrong route or giving up on routes and stuff like that. He hasn't been great. But also, I think if you get him in Buffalo, where he is not the number 2 receiver, where he is the number 4 receiver, and you can ask him to do some fun stuff, right? Ask him to be a gadget guy, maybe get a few snaps at running back. Yeah. Don't have him run routes all the time. Just have him be a fun. Don't have the receiver run routes. Laviska Shenault. I that's all I'm gonna say. Whoever gets Laviska Shenault is getting Kyle too. I'm coming with.
Fair enough.
Give
That's
the
gonna
Jags
be
a
me
fifth rounder for him.
That's gonna be me with Carl Nassib now that he's a free agent.
You're coming to package deal. I think, can he return kicks? He can return kicks. He can also probably kick the ball too. There wasn't much he didn't do at Colorado, to be honest. That's why I loved him. He was just this wild player in Colorado, and that's why everyone loved Laviska Shenault. But I think that wraps up this episode of the Cover One Roundup. A lot of talk here, probably our longest episode again, and we're gonna beat it next week by a long shot because it's the live mock draft.
Yes.
We need each and every one of you watching to come back next week and help us as we take the reins of the Buffalo Bills and go through a full 7-round mock draft with trades, stuff like that. Oh, we're going in. We're going to try to make the Bills. They already are a Super Bowl contender. We're going to try to, set them up for even more long-term success with the drafting of Jamison Williams maybe or Treylon Burks. Well, you're going to have to tune in to find out. I will pick a player between now and then, and I will have a Post-it note with whoever we are drafting, whoever I figured out. Great job, guys. Thank you so much. Mock draft roundtable.
The Cover One Roundup Roundtable mock draft. We're stealing that. Thank you, Jason Taylor. You've given us our title for next week. Thank you.
A lot of alliteration. That wraps up this week's show. Make sure to subscribe to the Cover One YouTube channel. You're here, I assume. So just click the subscribe button if you haven't. Yeah. Also, click the like button if you would be so kind. Subscribe on iTunes to the Cover One Roundup podcast feed and all the other Cover One podcast feeds as well. We got a bunch from over there. Subscribe. Yeah, I just said that. Leave a 5-star review again if you would like to. Consider subscribing to Cover One Premium. There you will have access to the Cover One Premium Slack where you can talk to hundreds of Bills fans each and every day about a variety of topics, exclusive content over there. Just always some great conversations going on over there about the Bills, about life, about all that good stuff. Again, that's the Cover One Premium Slack, available through Cover One Premium. Make sure to follow Cover One on Twitter at Cover One, on Facebook. I don't have Facebook. I don't have Twitter anymore either. All social media.
Did you get kicked off Twitter?
No, I kicked myself off Twitter. I had
you.
Enough of it. I had enough
Good
of it.
for you, Kyle.
We're done with that. But Cover One is on all social media all social medias, even TikTok. So check us out there. We are at some variation of at Cover One. You can follow David on Twitter at
DFAUXY or at DFoxy, if you will. I would normally throw it to you to have you throw out your app, but your Twitter is dead now. So
right, Kyle. Yep. RIP Kyle Twitter. You can still follow me. It's private though, so I just won't accept it. You'll be in limbo until I come back. But, so yes, thank you guys for watching. We will talk to you next week. Bye bye.